Hey guys, thanks for joining in. Hope you can see my screen, and just maybe some we can keep it really interactive. So what I'll do is I'll ask you guys to maybe just type out the feedback, questions, comment in the chat while we do this session. Thank you for joining on time. I know it's a bit early, but I hope every one of us is wide awake. If not, I'll make sure the session is interesting enough to keep you wide awake. So
Yeah, we can see your screen, Amitanshu. Yeah.
great, thanks, Vivek. Vijay. So, so the session for today would be on solving business problems using data science. I'm going to focus on some of the problems that we are solving using data science in my current company, which is called Cover Genius. I'll also show you some case studies that we are seeing. These are very interesting case studies, by the way. These are on travel insurance attachment rates. As you know, because of COVID, a lot of travel has come down globally. So it's an interesting case study of how cities are reopening and then um, people are traveling and then how they're buying insurance because now it becomes an important factor. So without further ado, let me just move on to the session agenda. It's going to be very simple agenda to solve business problem using data science. Not going to waste more time here. Who am I and what do I do? So I think I'm not sure if some of you would already know me because I do a couple of sessions for Greatom regularly. But for those of you who don't, I basically um, started as a data scientist in a startup in Bangalore, then moved my way into insurance. And in my last role, I was heading the new products and strategy team at Bharti AXA General Insurance Company. It's one of the largest insurers in India. And recently, couple of months back, I have switched the boards and joined Cover Genius, which is an Australian insurtech headquartered in Sydney. I'm a BTech in computer science from IIT Kanpur, class of 2015, and did my schooling from Agra in UP. So my journey, it's been a hell of a ride, to be honest. I think I started out as a data scientist as early as in May 2015 when I worked as a data scientist in a small startup, which is not mentioned here actually. Its name is Zenify. It was into real estate rentals and house. It's something like no brokers, right? They basically gives houses to young bachelors or to couples, or maybe you want to rent a house, they basically have a house for you to rent. So they were operational only in Bangalore. I was really scared that it was a data scientist was the name of the position. It was early 2015. There was no other person I could relate to because there was no other data scientist in my network, and I was honestly not sure whether I'm taking the right step or not. But I think over the years, over the last 5 years, there has been immense push globally in this domain, and I think that's helped me sort of rise quickly and stay where I am right now. And across all these roles, right, you can see that one thing which is common is the data science mentorship that I have been doing with Grey Atom and a couple of other institutions. And 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 that's a little bit about my journey. Happy to talk more about it in case required. So what my organization does, right? So it's basically it's actually a domain which is now created, which is called insurtech. So like there's banking, there's insurance, there's finance. So I think most of us would be aware about fintech as a subdomain, right? So that's something. In insurance it's called insurtech. And what my organization does is specifically look at the distribution and products in insurance. Okay, so what it means is you would have related to some of the insurance products like health insurance, life insurance, motor insurance in your day-to-day lives. But what we create is some innovative insurance products, right? So they can be pet insurance. It can be if the air quality goes too bad, you can get insurance for that. It can be spectacle or some small objects insurance, like furniture insurance at your home, something like that, and so on and so forth. So the way we create products is a very interesting way of using data, business understandings, demand from the consumer side, and product understanding to be able to get to the consumer. How exactly data science helps my organization? Well, in many ways, but I have just listed down three of them, which are the most critical and important. One is in dynamic pricing of the insurance products. So basically, we do not offer, let's take flight delay insurance, right? Let's say if it's the insurance which is given out to the consumer when the flight is delayed of the consumer, right? Now, those of you who have traveled in the past across India or internationally would know that flight delays is a big menace, right? All the flights continuously keep on delaying. Especially now in the case of COVID, there's a lot of cancellations also on top of delays. So, and this is not a localized thing, right? It basically changes from an aircraft carrier to aircraft carrier. So it may happen that Indigo flight delays a little bit less than other operators. Vistara is really good. Air India, on the other hand, can be delayed like every second flight can be delayed for Air India. So all these dynamicness leads to having a dynamic price also for the product. Otherwise it will become one size fits all approach, which you will end up either overcharging a consumer or undercharging a consumer, which is asking him lesser than what he should actually pay for. So that's basically where we use dynamic pricing in our organization. There are multiple avenues, multiple products which require this type of segregation, and that's where we do it. There's fraud detection, right? And that's very interesting, uh, of how we handle fraud detection. So I don't know if you know, but a lot of motor insurance cases are fraud, right? So basically, what are the different type of fraud that happens in motor insurance is people have a damage, they bump it up, right? So basically the front side of the car would be damaged, but they would just bring the side windshield, the side view mirror, and everything together at once, saying that all of these were damaged in the accident, whereas the reality might be the side mirror might have damaged way before, and it has nothing to do with that accident that happened, right? So that's bumping up the claims amount. Some people actually forcefully bang the cars, right? So they basically knowingly they ask someone to hit the car so that they can actually get a total loss in their cars and get the whole insurance amount in the banks, right? Because the second hand market value of the car would be lesser than the amount that they will get on the premiums. So all these things are there, which insurance companies need to take care of while settling the claims, and that's where fraud detection comes into the play and helps us in identifying the cases which are not good for the company. Then there's some technical portfolio modeling. Just to sort of for the benefit of the wider audience, there's something called a loss ratio in insurance lingo. Now, what that means is basically it just tells you the health of an insurance company, right? So basically, it tells out of the premiums, which is the money you're collecting for the products, how much you're paying out as a form of claims to the consumer. So basically, it's a ratio which defines how healthy of a company is yours, right? And it's very important to model this ratio, and there can be various factors in the modeling, right? So the first one can be the type of business, right? Each type of business generally operates at a very different loss ratio modeling, right? So for example, there's one type of business called motor insurance, which operates in a very different way. The other is commercial insurance, which is, I don't know if you're aware, but uh, a week back there was an earthquake in Delhi, right? It was of magnitude 4.6 on the Richter scale, so it was not particularly devastating. But there are bigger earthquakes which actually end up damaging a lot of houses, factories, and buildings. In those cases, what you buy is a earthquake insurance, or rather, you buy a commercial insurance, which includes earthquake, flood, inundation, and any natural calamity, right? Or in other ways, act of God. Okay, and I think some people can relate from the movie which was released a few years earlier, that all these things are highly technical subject matters, right? You have to sort of file a claim and show how the damage was done and all those things. So there's a lot of scope for actually data science to come in and improve the entire end to end-to-end user journey in this case. So again, portfolio modeling is another thing where we are using data science and different things to help us optimize the balance sheets. So I think mostly this is part is covered in my last question, which is what problems we are solving. So it's actually fraud prediction, dynamic pricing, and I think one of the things about dynamic pricing is that it eventually leads to conversion optimization, right? So now what is conversion optimization? So whenever you price a product, right, so whenever you see a website like Flipkart, Amazon, or Shopclues, Paytm, you always see there's a discount. Almost always there's some discount, right? 10%, 5%, 30%. What that discount is a trigger for the user to buy it, right? And we relate in a conscience that a good discount is typically 30%, and then we basically feel really good to place the order, right? What essentially these guys are targeting is a behavioral element to the human psychology, which triggers any action basis on a stimulus, the stimulus being the discount and the action being you purchasing the product. So that's basically conversion optimization, and that's how dynamic pricing helps in, you change a price in real time, looking at how many people will eventually buy it if you reduce the price, right? So basically your revenue is a multiplicative factor of two things: the price and the number of people buying it, right? So if you reduce the price by 5% but number of people buying it increases by 45% or 50%, right, you will still make much more revenues, right? So a lesser price need not always be bad for a company. Whereas on the other hand, for essential goods, right, so for essential goods, which is people need it, right, they will buy it. For example, water, right? I take 2 cans of Bisleri, 20 liters every week. Okay, so if the price increase by 5%, I'll not think about it. I'll just buy it because I know I don't have any other alternative. I cannot get a RO in this case because of COVID and no technician being available. I cannot get any other way, right? Any other way is like too difficult for me. So I think I'm paying $80 right now for a 20-liter bottle. Hypothetically, if I have to see the price I can afford till I will not make any fuss can actually be as high as 250, right? 250 per bottle, which is like the retail price of a 1 liter Bisleri bottle that is sold in the shops. So all these things actually are important when designing conversion optimization and pricing, right? That's where it helps, and we'll talk more about this in the subsequent slides. So there's data products innovation. There's some products that are exclusively made on data, right? So I'll talk more about what are the examples of such products which are made on data and which leverage data as a majority scale, and then we talk about what are the innovation happening in that domain. And then there's loss monitoring and control. So this again comes into the last point of portfolio modeling, in which we try to model the claims and the loss ratios in the company. Guys, any questions so far? Any thoughts, any comments? The pace is good, or you want me to slow up, speed up? Please do let me know in the chat or in the comments. Thanks, Mandan, for the thumbs up. I think this is a really good feature. So I think probably we can also use these ones. So I think in case you guys want a break, we can quickly have a small 5-minute break. I know this session is 90 minutes long, and honestly I don't know what to cover because I don't have enough material to last 90 minutes. So please feel free to jump in between, ask your questions. The more interactive the session is, the more chances are that you learn more out of it, right? Yeah, Manisha, I think you're saying something. Okay, I think.
So guys, if you have anything to ask, I think feel free to unmute yourself and ask the questions. So I think Mitansh's point is right. The more the interactive is the session, the more results you get, better results you get. Mitansh, you can continue.
Yeah, thanks, Vijay. So yeah, so the reason is that the reason I like interactiveness is because you know typically in any conference or in any session that you attend from any speaker, right? It's mostly a monologue, right? And the thing with monologue is that it's only good when the person is like Ratan Tata or someone else, right? So so typically when we are doing a session, the benefits of a dialogue is basically, or maybe a multi-log where a lot of people collaborate, is that there's a lot of perspectives. So maybe what I say may not hold true for someone else's company, right? And then it would be interesting to have that conversation of how things differ in these two countries, in these two companies, and of course different geographies as well. So cool. Feel free to sort of have your say in the Zoom icons. Okay, I continuously keep monitoring it. If I feel the need to take a short break, I'll do that, and then I'll just continue quickly. Okay, just give me a second. I'll just quickly grab a sip of water. Those of you at home, feel free to grab your cup of coffees, feel active, and then keep those questions coming. Right? Cool. Um, Problem solving is done. Let's move on to typical problem solving process. Okay. So I think the whole data science problem solving is a very intricate subject matter, right? It's having so many different touch points of where do you start it, what are the different inputs that you use to enrich the whole thing, and then effectively how do you eventually convert the business problem into a data science problem, right? Most of us would not have this experience of converting the business problem into data science problem because that's already converted to us. Imagine, so I think I'll just pause here for a moment and take the question from Deep. So Deep is saying, regarding dynamic pricing, do Amazon or Flipkart change the prices while we are browsing, or the time we spend on the product page? They don't. I think they don't do it right now because it would be illegal, right, to just sort of do it. But let me give you a live example of how another player did it. Okay, airlines definitely do it because their inventory, which is their seats, changes over time. So it can happen that they had 10 seats when you started, and then over time you took 5 minutes to understand, and then it's just 8 seats, yeah, remaining. So I think that's a different constraints. They are changing the price um, because of the inventory closure, right? But they're not changing because you are browsing longer, right? Your browsing longer doesn't changes the price on Amazon. But really good question. And I think as Amrinder is saying, right, sorry, as Pooja is saying, Uber did it for sure, right? It was called Project Snowball or something. I don't know, there's a Netflix documentary out there. I'm just too early in the morning to remember what was the name of it. But what they did was, okay, and this is very sneaky the way they did it. Okay, they analyzed the battery levels in the phone of the users. Okay, and if the battery level was low, like less than 5%, they knew that people are gonna take any rate that comes to them, right? They're not gonna wait for 1 or 2 minutes to check whether the rate is less or not. So they actually increase the price by 5, 10, maybe in some cases even 15, 20% higher. And actually they ran it for quite a while, unless they were asked by the regulatory authority that what is the basis for this pricing, and they had no answer, right? They had no answer because this is discrimination, right? Increasing the price basis on a battery level, even though it's genius, but at the end of the day it's discrimination. So guys, I think dynamic pricing is a very fine line to walk on, right? Because there's a very subtle difference between discrimination and then pricing on the basis of actual factors. So for example, pricing on gender, pricing on age, these are discriminative factors. And I think as data scientists, I think I'll speak more about this in the last, that we have to be all ethical, that once we do a model implementation, we also have to understand its implications. Okay, so implementation and implication should go actually hand in hand, and that's where a good data scientist would virtually place itself. I'm not too sure about Udemy, how they do it, but if they do it, it's great for them, right? It's if it's bringing them some revenue and all. So Niyati is asking, are there regulations in place to control dynamic pricing? Yes, there are. In financial sectors, there are authorities like SEBI, and there's authorities like IRDA, Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India. So all these companies, all these government watchdogs, right? They basically ensure that no company is cheating the consumer, no organization is asking an unfair price or making you know unfair amounts of profits. So there's also an anti-profiteering committee, right, which basically has just one rule: anybody who makes more than 20-30% margin on any one product, they will just slap notices on them, which is kind of good, right? Because it avoids um, the the excess of uh, centralization or money to one particular account. So I think thanks for triggering that chain of thought, Deep. It's very well appreciated. Keep them coming over the session. So as I was saying, when you convert a business problem into data science problem, it's actually very interesting, and most of you might not have done it, because the way we get our data science problem is like how Kaggle gives it to us. So the way Kaggle works is, you just go there, you have a business problem well defined, you have a data set well defined, and you start working, right? And effectively in organizations is very different. So those of you who will have practical experience of working in any company, right, you would actually see that it's nothing like Kaggle, right? It's nothing like Kaggle. Nobody seems to know where's the data set located. There's so many different people, users, and silos that you need to actually go through to even collect the data, right? Forget about analyzing. To even collect, it's a big task. And I'm talking about most of the big companies, right? I've actually worked in 6 of them, but almost some of you can actually, those of you who are working or who have experience can maybe relate to it, that it's not an easy task collecting a data set in an organization, right? Unless it's like as big as Facebook, Google, or Microsoft, Amazon, right, where there's like uh, basic hygiene factors already established. So I think once you rise the path, once you start becoming, the business managers and the higher up the ladder, what you will get is very abstract problems from your management. Now, what an abstract problem looks like can be increasing profits for North region, okay, or it can be increasing commission for our partners, right? It is just simply one-liners that typically CEOs come and just shower at you, and then you have to think, you have to wrap your head around, okay, to increase the sales, what all things you need to do, or to increase the top line, what all things you need to do, right? All those things is something which you as a business person would need to answer and solve for. So the first step is, I think, defining the business problem. It's not as simple as it sounds like. It's a very difficult thing to do. So let me just take a use case in insurance. Okay, let me walk you through that for this chart. Okay, so let's say if the insurance company's goal is to reduce the loss ratios in the south region. Okay, that's a business problem. That's the word of a CEO, that Amitanshu, I want you to reduce the loss ratios in Bangalore as a city. Okay, that's my task for, let's say, next 2-3 months. How would I actually go about it? So the business problem is not yet defined. It's just a goal which is defined for me, which is reducing the loss ratios. Now, first I deconstruct what is loss ratio. It's basically the income of a company divided by the loss or the outgo of the company, right? So basically it's just the income divided by whatever the money that is going. So so that's defined. Success criteria is defined, and we have a very clear objective on the business problem, but we do not have a very clear objective on the data science problem, right? So what do? You break it down. You break it down into a data science problem. How would you do that? First is, uh, can I predict which parts of Bangalore will lead to more sales? Okay, that becomes number one. It will tell me how I bring in more sales, predicting where the consumer lives. And what are the factors that we can use? Anybody would like to suggest? What are the factors that you can think of when you actually look to sell insurance? And insurance is a technical matter, guys. Okay, it's not as simple as buying a pair of jeans or a mobile phone. People actually need to think twice, and there's also a trust factor in insurance whenever you buy insurance. So what are the things you will consider when you think about the insurance sales? We have one answer. Age is
Yeah,
definitely one.
Hey, Amitabh, Harinath here.
Yeah, hi Adinath.
Okay. Is it, are you asking as a insurance provider or someone who is buying
As an
insurance?
insurance provider, so the business problem that I discussed about is my CEO. So I'm taking a insurance companies. So insurance company CEO is saying, I want to reduce the loss ratios in a particular city, right? And a loss ratio is a factor of two things: the income earned divided by the claims paid. As simple as that, right? So I'm just solving the first part now. See, reducing the loss ratios, I can do that by maybe increasing the income earned, right? If I increase the income earned, normally my loss ratios are contained because my claims are less.
Yes.
The first part we are thinking is, how do we increase the business in a city where, and what are the factors that we need to consider? And I think a lot of people are just hitting it right on the point, right? So age, let me tell you how important of a factor age is. And thanks Shri and Manthan for raising it up. People actually start buying insurance when they reach 30. That's a rule of thumb, right? A lot of people start buying insurance when they reach 30. So for insurance companies, our target audience age group is actually 30 to 50. That's the target audience age group that we look for, because these are the people who understand the need. These are the people who are actually careful because they now have a family, probably they have a kid, and then they realize that they need to get the security for these things. Okay, so yes, age is a big factor. Salary is another big factor, but not so much, right? I mean, of course, if you have a good salary, that's good, but the insurance premium don't cost so much, right? So so it's important of how much of a coverage you want, right? Let's say if I'm a business owner, or if, so I think what I'm looking at is probably lifestyle, or rather the the occupation, right? Occupation is more important than salary, because if I am a person who works in a very hazardous industry, let's say I work in a chemical plant, okay, there's more chances of me getting into an accident rather than a person who's just going to work in a tech company, because he's just going to work in front of his laptop. There's a nice building. But a person who's in a chemical plant, right, he's dealing with like 10 different machines which are like having severe to medium risk categories, right? So occupation is a big factor when deciding where to give insurance or not. Lifestyle again is a big factor, right? And I think loans, yes, I think a person who has more loans is also a more credit risk worthy person. So so actually, if I have, let's say, 10 loans on me, okay, and let's say each loan is about 5 lakhs each, so I have about 50 lakhs of worth of debt on my head. Okay, so I would genuinely be scared that if something happens to my health and I'm unable to pay my loan, it's a big risk for my family, for me, and for others who are there in the journey with me. So what I'll do if I have more loans, I will actually go and buy a health insurance or a life insurance, because should it to happen that I get hospitalized, or I unfortunately die, I actually have a insurance to protect my relatives, right? So that these guys do not go to my relatives to recoup my money. They don't sell my house to recoup the money. Okay, so all those things are really very, very important. Socio-economic status. Niyati, would you like to elaborate on that? I didn't exactly get it.
Hi. So basically, actually, I have been working in market research and I've been doing field research
Yeah.
studies for insurance companies. So what we do is, SEC is basically defined to basically classify the strata of the population. So, it basically used to depend on the education and the occupation of the chief wage earner in the house. Now, it depends on the education and the number of assets that the person has. So, somebody who is probably SEC A plus would be somebody who would fall in the higher income bracket, like if we go to say, and accordingly it becomes SEC A, SEC B, and so on.
Okay, got it. So I think, yeah. So
So
probably then this probably got covered in the salary and the, you know, and the
like the
job
income.
group and also the income group. Yeah, I think so I think social sector comes in the region part, right? So which part of the country you live in, right? So if you live in Mumbai, of course, the social part is actually maybe, I don't know, but yeah, good point. I think it's partly covered. Um, quick question from Atul. So Atul, just before I come to your question, I'll just quickly look at the other points for. So I think, yeah, most of these things we covered. So health of a person, age, income, social economic status, chances of selling to a company. Purva probably is coming into an angle of commercial insurance where we know where we sell it to maybe big companies instead of an individual, and then the whole data sets become changed. Okay, so now when you're selling to companies, it's becoming a B2B proposition, and it's actually pretty big, pretty huge. But then again, it will have different. So then you will look at the turnover of the company, what is the industry vertical that it operates in, how many employees it has, and what is the average salary of a employee, of those kind of things. Okay, so Atul has a question. I'm from non-insurance background. How improving loss ratio in Bangalore is related to selling more insurance? Good question, Atul. So I think, see, as I said, the whole ratio is the income earned divided by the claims paid. Okay. Now, if I need to manage my whole operations here, I can do two things. I can either increase my income or I can decrease my claims. Okay. So effectively, it's basically a combination of these things. And now we are focusing on income earned. I didn't even touch upon how do we reduce claims part. When we reduce claims part, we'll talk about how do we assess a claims better, or how do we make sure that there's no fraud. I'll just come to that part in a moment. But I hope you get maybe a little bit of inclination of where we are going to. Amrinder is saying targeted ads, people watching those ads, clicks, and targeting those. Yes, sure. I mean, you can always show ads and then target those ones who are interested. But effectively, Amrinder, what I'm asking is the idea is to increase the sales, and advertisement is just one category, right? You need to really define, because I can actually advertise for anything and get the sales on anything, right? It's just a bit generic in nature. So I think more about it, and then let's discuss some of the things. Okay, cool. So a lot of points on how to increase revenue, and I think we get it. We get it how we can actually penetrate more sales for insurance in a region. Let's talk about the second element of it, which is the claims part. Okay, that's the amount of money that the company pays out whenever there's a claim. I think there's some background noise, guys. Can someone go mute? I think probably it's someone forgot to unmute themselves. Thank you so much. So, so we are very close to defining the data science problem here. Okay, so we are designing the data science problem, which is first is targeting of people, and we are deciding that these are the different factors that we can target, put in the model to find out a propensity score. Okay, what this thing is called in the technical language is called a propensity modeling thing. Okay. The second part is claims reduction. Okay, so we split the business problem. Okay, there's business problem split into propensity modeling for sales, and the second problem now we'll talk about is claims part. Okay, so let's say the insurance companies only sell motor and health insurance. Okay, let's say just to simplify the things. Okay, these are the only two products sold by the motor insurance the insurance company. Now, how will you ensure that there are lesser claims, or even if there are claims, there are lesser amount that the company pays out to the consumer? Okay, so that's again a broad business problem, but we need to convert it into a data science problem. How do we make sure that we pay out less and we pay less frequently? Okay, so basically two things we need to focus on. A is we have to reduce the claim frequency, so we have to get lesser number of people who now claim with us. And B is we have to reduce the claim severity, which is out of all the claims, if the average claim was coming for 20,000 rupees, now I want to reduce it to maybe 18,000 rupees. These are the two things. How would I do that if it's health and motor insurance? Okay, let me give a clue. For health insurance, typically people don't just go and get up hospitalized in a hospital, right? It's largely not the case. There are visible factors before, let's say, a person who has a dialysis surgery. He would not just wake up one day and say, oh, I need to go and do the dialysis surgery, let me just go today. It's not a sudden thing unless it's an accident. Accidents are sudden, but I am not considering that for now. So in health, there are visible factors like diabetes, chronic disorders, which can actually have a very strong correlation towards what type of operation would you require. Yeah, exactly. So Monica, you're right on the point. Patient history is very important when you actually sell or take the health insurance claims. Okay, now if a patient has a history of diabetes, he's most likely to have some heart related disorders, because there's a strong correlation, okay, between diabetes and heart related disorders. So that's one. Anything else? For motor insurance, how can you reduce the frequency of claims? Let me give you a clue, okay? By giving helmets to people. A simple thing as giving helmets to people can reduce your frequency of preventive tips. Yes, again, right. So why is it required? Because whenever you're in an accident, if the person gets an injury, you are at the end, you are paying for his hospitalization, or if he dies, you are paying for the entire amount. Okay, that's a big amount. That typically goes into the range of 2-3 crores. Okay, so what is good is you give out the consumers the helmets. Okay, and you work on the preventive tips which Abhishek mentioned, and you try to reduce. So in that case, what you're trying to do, you're trying to reduce the severity of the whole thing there. Okay, the severity part is reduced, but the frequency is still not reduced. It's the same number of people who are falling into the accidents per month as it was before. You are just controlling the loss. So Shri has a very amazing answer. Prevent drink and drive, maximum action happens with DUI. So if you prevent that part, you actually are coming in the reduction of frequency part, which is the first element to claims. Okay, so as you would remember, there are two things to claims: frequency and severity. Okay, and both of these things have to be changed. So what my data science problem becomes here? My data science problem becomes to reduce the frequency of the claims, and then for those claims which are coming, reduce the average amount paid out by the company. Okay, and there can be multiple factors that I can use to model these two things, but let's talk more about it as we go along. Okay, but now I guess now you're coming to understand, how do you break down a business problem actually, and then proceed to map it to a machine learning problem, and then break it down into sub problems, look at all the factors, and then perform all these data points strategy, and then transformation into the data preparation, and then move on to exploratory data analysis. Okay, which is just looking at the data, how it is split out and all those things. Nimesh is asking, what about the terms and condition of insurance? Nimesh, can you elaborate on that part?
Maybe, sir, it's like, what about the term and condition of insurance? How of the claim we can neglect like that only?
Oh, so you're saying out of the claims, how can we neglect the claims? So Nimesh, as a company, okay, as a company, you would not like to neglect a lot of claims, because what it will do is it will spoil the image of you in front of the consumers. Okay, so better than neglecting is you don't let the claim happen in the first place. Okay, so that's what we were discussing in the first place. Because if you see, I don't know how many of you are planning to buy health insurance or life insurance. A very important factor that people see when buying these type of insurances is the claim ratio. Okay, which is the number of percentage of companies, percentage of claims paid by the company divided by the percentage of total claims. Okay, and people actually like this number to be above 99, 97, 98%, because that gives them confidence that the company will actually pay their claim out. So yeah, so as Pooja is saying, claim ratio is actually an important thing. So rather than saying that, okay, I will try to reject a claim, just try to see if I can stop a claim from coming, or if a claim comes, I pay out a lesser amount, right? Which is if I can improve it. So one of the questions I will one of the thoughts I will leave you with is, it's my sort of very important understanding is that you can have specific hospitals, okay, which can be really really good, and they are specialized in some part of surgeries, okay. And let's say if it's a heart hospital, it's a specialty heart clinic, what you can do is you can take people and then suggest them to go to that hospital, and then that hospital, because it's a specialty hospital, it's just dealing in the heart patients, it knows how to save the cost, okay. Whereas if it's a multi-specialty hospital, it's doing everything, they will actually end up charging more. It's like saying, it's like saying what is the best efficiency of a hospital, and then routing the patients to that hospital for that particular efficiency, and then choosing other hospitals for other efficiencies to save the cost, okay, at the same time making sure that the person gets the same experience everywhere. So that's about it. So yeah, so once you define the exploratory data analysis, you kind of just do some statistical visual analysis, and then then the modeling starts. Now the thing to notice with modeling is that actually modeling is just 20% of the whole effort, right? The majority of the effort that you will be doing is actually in breaking the first four aspects of these things, which is defining the business problem, mapping the machine learning, data preparation, and then doing EDA. The model fitting and evaluation would be the simplest of all, right? You just need to check what are the features, convert them into the numerical vectors, dummy variables conversion, all those things, and then you kind of just evaluate it, and then maybe redefine the business problem. Okay, if you understand that there is no effect of salary on person buying insurance or not, you actually go and then change it, right? You just change the feature there, you remove it from there. Okay, so Amrinder, yes, what's your question?
Hi, Amitan. It might not be a data science question, but just now when you mentioned the hospitals, one thing that popped up is when we take an insurance and when we go for suppose an operation, if without operation the cost of operation is 50,000, if we tell that we have an insurance, the hospital suddenly charges us 80K. But what they are trying to say is you have an insurance, actually you are not. I don't know by what perspective they increase the amount, but they think like we are paying from the insurance. But actually, what is happening is, suppose I have a 5 lakh cover, and if in a year I have multiple diseases, and if the hospital is charging me more, actually my insurance amount is getting reduced because I am the one paying the insurance. So, are these hospitals directly related to the insurance models and they do it under a scheme, or are the insurance providers also looking at these practices of hospitals and avoiding them?
Sorry, Amrinder, I didn't completely get it. Can you just maybe state the question part?
My question is, when we have an health insurance, the price of the operation or anything is suddenly raised by the hospital.
Right.
So, is there a relation between the insurance providers and hospitals, or are the insurance providers also looking at those schemes, and does it affect their final customer retention in a way?
Good point. Good point. So I think, see, ideally, if I have an insurance company, I would love to open up a chain of hospitals where I actually control how the patient is treated and how much cost he bears. Because if you see, in that case, I'm having end to end touch point with the consumer. Okay, I take the money to safeguard his health, and then in case, unfortunately, if he ends up in hospitalization, I also have my own hospital in which I'm treating him. Okay, so next time I actually know better which type of disease causes more, which type of disease is having more cost to it, and then I can charge a better premium to the consumer. Okay, so hence safeguarding myself as a company. Okay, now to answer your question, yes, there are a lot of companies which are having their own hospital chains. To give you an example, there's Manipal Cigna Health Insurance. Okay, and you might be aware of Manipal group of hospitals. There is Max New York Life Insurance, and you can be aware that there's a Max group of hospitals which also treat people. So these are the type of companies which are actually having both a life or a health insurance company, as well as a chain of network hospitals. Okay, Apollo Munich, okay, which recently became HDFC Ergo. So you are all aware of Apollo hospitals in India, right? There's a big chain of Apollo hospitals in India, and they also have a health insurance company. So what benefit it gives? Exactly what you pointed out, Amrinder, that they command both the things, and it's very important to do that. I hope it answers your question, right?
Yes, Amit.
Thanks. So, Atul is asking a question on coming back to the problem part. Curious, wouldn't it be easy to focus on issues which are behind decline of loss ratio rather than going randomly on increase in selling? Would we rather debug an issue with EDA and top 5 factors, focus on, and then apply it as a problem? Yes, very good point, Atul. See, that's what a actual company would do. We are not in the company, right? So I don't want to speak. I don't want to actually give you all those points because it's a valid point. See, it's different. Atul, what we are mentioning is a difference between a cold start and a warm start problem. What we are discussing right now is a cold start problem where we are discussing possibly all the items that we can take into the book, right? Imagine a new company, a fresh company which has no experience so far. If that is doing that, that is what we are discussing. What you're mentioning is existing problems which are behind the decline of loss ratios and all those things that will come into a warm start problem. For that, it will be very important to know the context, okay? And we don't have the context here. We are just discussing something on a very generalist basis. So I think it is good, but if you want, what we can do is we can just feel free to ping me on LinkedIn, and let's take it offline, and I would be able to give you an exact representation of what are the factors which are actually helping all these things. So that is good. That's good part. Cool. So I think we went through this whole business problem to data science problem, and you have all the goals that the CEO asked. Okay, he just asked one goal, is that how do I reduce my loss ratios in a particular city. So what I want you guys is to just take some time. Okay, take maybe take 10 minutes or so, and what you need to do is send me one-to-one recommendation to the CEO. Okay, and it's a recommendation to the CEO, guys. It should not be a very big paragraph having your things. The recommendation should be very crisp. Let's say 2-3 pointers of what you will actually share to the CEO, and then let's resume in a short 10 breaks. Let's grab our coffees, have a sip of water, and resume at 9. And in the meanwhile, I'll just look forward to the responses, and I'll mention the top few responses in the session. Just remember to share it to just me on a one-to-one message, not to the entire group, because I just want each of us to think critically, and not in a group.
Amitansh, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Who's this?
Yeah, Vijay, Amitansh.
Yeah, Vijay, hi.
Yeah, are the learners doing some activity?
Yes, they're doing some activity.
Okay, okay. Because I just wanted to launch a quick poll on their screens, but I think once they are done, I'll launch then. It would be
Okay,
better. Okay.
perfect. Yeah. So we'll be done in next 2, 3, 5 minutes. I'll let you know.
Cool, cool. Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. So great responses coming in from all the people. I think I really appreciate responses from Manthan, Abhishek, Monica, Arun. I think most of you have actually touched upon the same thing, which is good. But I'm just curious, what is happening to other people? Are we not, guys? Others, we have about 32 participants, and I'm just seeing probably 5 or 6 interacting actively. What's happening to the others, guys? So meanwhile, I'll just quickly answer Atul's request. So Atul, I was just thinking about your question, right? Which is, it doesn't have an easy answer. Okay, I don't want to say that there's one way you can get domain knowledge. There's other way. Okay, it's not as easy as it's a deep question that you have just asked. So what I would say is, let's say I am in insurance. Okay, I'm in insurance for the past 4 years. So I have acquired over these 4 years a significant phase of different parts of insurance. In the early phase, I acquired the basic terminologies, lingo, and then in the later phase, I acquired some tactical and strategical business understanding. How does motor insurance function? How does health insurance functions? And all these vertical wise things. And then now I'm looking at the business angle of it, right? So let's say if I were and I actually am interested in trading. Okay, let's say I want to become a hedge fund trader, or I want to become a quantitative analyst, and then analyze. And let's say if I have to change, or if I have to acquire domain knowledge, what do I do? How do I acquire it, right? If I don't come from the same industry. So I'll just give you my example. What do I do? I hit up my friends who are in trading. That's the first thing I do. I just hit them up, send them a message. Hey, how's it going? What is it that you do daily? And how's the thing going? And then they tell me some parts about their life. They say, oh, the markets are down right now. It's a very tricky thing. And then they say that, okay, as part of being a trader, you have to eat, sleep, and breathe stock markets. Then what do? I start doing that, right? The trick is that if you're interested in a domain that you're not currently working, you already assume that you're working in that domain, and then do whatever you would have done if you were in that domain. That's the fastest way, I believe, you can actually acquire the domain knowledge. So another example, right? When I joined insurance industry, I started picking and choosing news articles to read about insurance sector, right? It was a forced thing that I developed because I was in that industry. I had to chat about that to my CEO, to my team who was there in AXA, and all those things. I needed to inform them, right? So there was a general curiosity, and what happened over the time was I actually was in the mindset, I was selectively just figuring out. Whenever I used to read something, I was just finding out insurance terminology there, right? So I think there's no particular path or a journey which can lead you to a domain knowledge, right? It's just some independent efforts, and I think some unique ways you can suit yourself to find domain knowledge with the advent of all these groups and LinkedIn posts. You can actually learn a lot of good things in very quick time. But I hope that gave you a good idea. Cool. So I think lots of good question. I think so. I think let me just summarize some of the answers that a lot of you are giving. Is you have two things. A is you optimize the sales part, okay, and the way you optimize it is by considering various aspect of a consumer personality. Okay, it can be their age, salary, location, occupation, and all those things, to target them better. Okay, so if a person is more keen, he has about 2-3 cars, you actually target him with a discount offer. And if a person is let's say having a high morbidity, you target him with a specific product, like a diabetes specific product or something like that. And on the claim side, you just don't target at rejecting claims, you actually target at reducing claims. Okay, there's a difference between rejection and reduction. So you target at the latter one more, and then you just try to save some money there. Okay, so I think these are the 2-3 things that I'm seeing a lot of you are answering. Thank you all for who answered. Niyati, Harinath, Rohit, Manthan, good answers. I think Manthan talked about a very good point, okay, which is, can you define? So Manthan talked about, can we build some model that will predict the future claims based on the insurance sold? So FII Manthan, that's the biggest important thing for an insurance company. It's called loss cost modeling. It's basically selling where you see selling less where you see higher claims. So for example, I'll tell you one fact. Okay, in Gurgaon and parts of Haryana, okay, because I don't know if it's the case, there's huge uh, cases of accident in luxury cars like Audi, BMW, and all those things. Okay, so typically what companies do, they have blacklisted those areas, they don't sell it, so you won't find very easily insurance for luxury vehicles in Gurgaon. Or if you find, you will actually pay a higher rate, as you would be doing let's say if you're in Bangalore and Mumbai. Okay, you will be paying less. So that's one implication of a loss cost model, which is selling on the basis of how the loss experience is, and it can be done. So good point there. It naturally came from you, so that's again a good thing. um, and I think thanks Ronak and everyone else really who helped in solving the things. So moving on, I think I'll quickly hand over to Vijay. He mentioned he wants to ask some poll, and I'll just take a quick break, guys. I'll just be back in 2 minutes. I'm just gonna grab my cup of coffee. Just feeling.
Thanks, Amitansh. Thank you, guys. I'll just launch a short poll on your screens. It won't take like more than few seconds. You will see a poll now. Okay, I would request everyone to take this poll, please. Like there are 30 people, and I would like everyone to take this. Very important from the session's point of view. Thank you, guys. Thanks for taking the poll. I think I can end the poll now. Yeah. Amitansh will start in a minute or two.
Are we done with the poll?
Yes, Amitansh, we are done.
Well, I'm just curious, what was the poll about? I couldn't get to see it.
It was actually like, how was the session, and would they like such sessions regularly?
Do you get the instant result? Can you also show the results? We cannot see that.
Oh, yes.
Or it's like private confidential something.
So it's basically for internal analysis.
Alright, no worries. No, I'm just pulling.
I'll definitely share this with you. Not a problem.
Okay, no worries. Okay, great. Thanks, Vijay.
No problem.
Cool. So we'll quickly move on to the slides. Okay, I'll reshare my screen. So we'll discuss this part. We paused here for getting the recommendations to back to CU, and I think probably you guys just now understand, okay, how important it is. It's not as easy as all these blocks seem. It's actually much harder work. There's much more intricacies to this, and this is just one step. This is a complex diagram, but even this cannot come close to matching an actual business problem when you have at hand, right? And that's where you realize that the importance of critical thinking and importance of attention to details comes in really in these cases. Quickly moving on, some examples of business problems. Okay, so I mentioned about dynamic pricing, conversion optimization. Typically the stakeholder who would be responsible for such kind of problem statement would be the CEO and the CFO, because you're directly contributing to the top line revenue of the company. Okay, the solution that we did was actually, it was travel insurance. Okay, and I'm not going to discuss too much details here. Those of you who are interested can actually because we have about only 10 odd minutes to cover it. So what we did was, in short, we understood that people who are booking travel in advance, okay, like let's say there's 3 months to your travel, you will have time to buy insurance. You will not be that gungu about buying insurance at that moment only. Okay, whereas if you're traveling, let's say in a week time, if you're traveling internationally, if you're going to Sydney or to Bangkok, Thailand, or to wherever, right, and you're going, let's say in the next 1 week, or let's say you're going in the next day, right? There's not much time to seek a travel insurance. So you'll just buy whatever is there at whatever price it's giving, right? So what we did was we optimized the price to be lesser when the duration was high, duration between the time of buying and the actual trip. Because at the time of selling travel insurance, we ask you that what are your intended travel dates. We ask the consumer this question, right? And what we did was we effectively increased the price by 5% when the consumer was buying at the last moment, and then we reduced the price if the consumer was buying, let's say, within a 1 month or a 2 month or a 3 month kind of a time frame. And what was the result? 23% uplift in conversion, which is the final revenue was higher 23% for the test cohort which we tested upon as compared to the average set. Now the challenges faced in these things were regulations. Okay, generally regulations don't allow to discriminate on the basis of time, but here, since it was a discount, we could always say that we didn't say that we are increasing the price. Okay, the price was the same. We just said if you buy earlier, we'll give you a 10% discount. Okay, that's how we positioned it. And that's where you will also realize how what are the tactics that company use actually to actually lure in the customers. And that's how we sort of leapfrogged that particular case. The second case, loss monitoring and control. Again, this is a part we discussed a lot of times. I'll just take example of motor insurance. What we did there was, typically in motor insurance, how the process is that once you hit your car, once you damage your car, there's a person appointed by the insurance company which comes and looks at your car, right? He assesses how badly the car is damaged, and then he pays out the claim. Okay, it's it's fairly a redundant process. I mean, if you trust your consumer, there should be no need of this person, because frankly this person doesn't add too much efficiency. The car is any which way is your car. It's going to be repaired by a garage, and the person is just coming and seeing if the car is damaged or not. So it's basically just verifying whether you are defrauding the system or not. And I'm just curious, can anyone quickly suggest how would you do that? How would you make sure that you verify without mobilizing a person? Just 10
Like a
seconds.
video call or photographs?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Arinath. So we exactly did that. We utilize a video call solution, and we gave a tablet to the garage owner. Okay, and the garage owners we gave the tablet to were affiliated with the company. So we know that these people will not lie, these people will not cheat, because they are our partners. Okay, and then whenever a new car came, there was no person who was mobilized from our team. He was just opening the tablet, starting a video which was recorded, submitted to the claims team. They just viewed it remotely, and then they settled the claims. 30% and above efficiency obtained, right? What is the efficiency? No need to pay the salary for the person who is there. Just doing the daily job of running and then just seeing. He can probably do better things. He can just maybe become a claims assessor at his home. Now he doesn't need to travel. Okay, he just sits in the home and then does it. The challenges we faced in this case was data standardization. That's the biggest challenge, because when you get a video, it's very hard to annotate that video. Okay, what annotate means is to label. Okay, from the video to extract which is the type of car, what is the model, what is the color, how. Okay, and the second thing which video will have a very hard time to tell is how bad is the damage is. Okay, it can look like a small bump, but only when you touch it, feel it, is when you identify that's a big one or not. So there what we use is the help of a garage owner to map it to a standard form, and then fill it out and send it to us. Okay, so that's how basically the whole problem was solved. The third and the last problem is data products innovation. Okay, and this was for the board of the company and the management company. Okay, uh, and the impact of the solution here is, the reason I put this example is, it's not just related to numbers. Okay, when you design innovation, it actually has wings beyond numbers, which is top line, bottom line. It doesn't necessarily stay there. Innovation has a lot to do with your brand value and positioning. Okay, it has to, of course it will lead to a top line revenue if you define an innovative product, but effectively what it is more important is to have that sort of a talent mindset and that personality that you can change the status quo. You can go and challenge them and say, no, we can do this, and then you know uh, actually do it. So some examples here: we filed 7 products with the Indian regulator when I was in my previous role, out of which 4 got approved in record time. What are these 7 products? First one is flight delay insurance. I can talk more about in later cases. The second is air quality index insurance. In Delhi during Diwali, you all are aware that the air quality exceeds really hazardous thresholds. Okay, what we can do is whenever such thing happen, we can pay out the consumer so that at least he can take care of the health. He can buy air purifiers, he can take a cab instead of going uh, on a train or something like that, okay, on a metro or something like that. And what it helps is consumer sees the company as a positive thing rather than seeing the company as someone who just takes the money and doesn't pay out. They see as our friend, right? And they feel good about the company, and then next time they buy anything, they will just relate to that company's name and then say that, okay, I bought this one product with the company, it was a good experience because it was a very innovative product. Let me buy my motor insurance also from this company, let me buy my parents health insurance also from this company. So what it leads to is a good brand value and positioning, and of course it also gives you the top line revenue. So that's about the cases. Some skills that helped me to do well, as I spoke earlier, is attention to details, efficacy. Okay, efficacy is really important, getting the results. Okay, uh, in real companies, all these new age algorithms, technology doesn't do move anything significantly unless you can achieve the results. They want to see how much improvements in claim month on month, year on year. They're tracking all these numbers. Okay, and unless and until the numbers move, all these things can actually be as good as something on a piece of paper. And focus on the big picture is the last thing that helped me, which is if you're designing a solution, right? It can happen that you get a solution to design for reducing the motor claims frequency. Okay, but always focus that the larger picture is reduction in loss ratio, which is a larger picture of having a better profitability for the company, which has a larger picture of getting into IPO, which is the largest picture of a conglomerate opening up a new business vertical in India. Okay, I'm saying the larger picture never ends. Okay, eventually you can talk about GDPs, nation empowering each other, and then eventually the largest picture actually is very bleak. Okay, it's not a very good thing because it just leads to thing, but it's always good to always have a next scenario in the head. Quickly discussing hiring at my organization, what we look at is the process is typically a telephonic round with a in-person round. Now I think in-person rounds are not happening, so it's just telephonic rounds and video call rounds if required. um, what mistakes we saw the candidates make is people think listening is just as same as hearing. Okay, it's not. You can be hearing but you can listen nothing. So what listening is, can you comprehend not just what the other person is saying, but where is he coming from, why is he saying that? Maybe it's a pressing pain point for them, that's why they are asking. And people who listen actually outperform much better. Do not rush to answer the questions that the interviewer asks you. Always take your time, take 2-3 minutes also if required before you utter even a single word. It Chances are that the more you think about the question, the better answer you give. He wouldn't mind, he wouldn't think a candidate came and he answered 2 minutes late, but he will actually say to his bosses that a candidate came and he actually gave a thoughtful answer, which even helped me think more about this whole problem, and then he will surely hire you. Okay, so that's a very important thing. Communication lag, always make sure that you have double understood the same thing. Never repeat uh, never be hesitate to repeat what the interviewer is saying. Okay, you can actually always repeat, okay, so to understand you properly, are you saying this, so that you are very sure that you have no communication lag. Okay, and it sometimes communication lag can happen. So always remember about that part. And the last point is that wherever a company you apply, okay, don't just apply because you see, oh, it's a big company, it's a big name, I have heard about it, and oh, I'm gonna get a big salary about it and all those things. Okay, always do research. Why do you think you're a good fit for the company? They will ask you certain things, know about it, read some news articles about it, know who is the CEO of the company. Okay, it's very important to know all these things. So doing homework about the company is very important. We saw some candidates do some mistake, and it's a good thing. Tips to succeed as a data scientist: perseverance, because of course you're not going to get the result in the first time, so you have to kind of be at it. There's a quote by some renowned personality that I saw, which said intuition is the highest form of intelligence. Okay, and I think I pretty much like that quote, because if you see all the best sports players, okay, Virat Kohli, Serena Williams, Roger Federer, Djokovic, what they do, okay, by training day in day out, what are they doing? Are they increasing their skills, or their intuition skills they obtained maybe in the first 2 years of their Grand Slam victory, then they don't improve any skills. They already know backhand, they already know squash or smash, they already know all those kind of things, right? What they're improving then is the intuition. Okay, what if this pattern comes which they've not seen before? What if the opponent tries to do that thing which I'm not ready to prepare for? All those things basically lead to your intuition. You will acquire the skills in a finite amount of time, but intuition takes a lifetime to build. Okay, and that's the point I want you guys to think about and take it from this session. And the last point is what we discussed is in the part before, is ethics in data science. It's very important to have that ethical angle to yourself when you are working on a data science problem. Always think, am I doing right for the consumer? Am I doing right for myself? And is it leading to any sort of bad outcome for any of the parties involved? Always keep that mindset. Okay, do not always agree to chasing profits at the sake of losses to poor people. Okay, there's nothing bad than ripping off people for their money. Okay, I've seen so many instances of people just trying to optimize the revenue, top line, bottom line, and all that kind of things. But the most important part is the consumer experience, CX. Always focus on that part and focus that you are actually right well on the ethics. I think that's mostly from my side. I'll take any questions if you have.
Guys, I think we've got a good 5 to 7 minutes. If you have any questions, I think we can utilize this time for that. And I've also shared a feedback form, guys. It's very important you fill that. I'm sharing the link once again. Kindly fill it. Don't forget to fill it.
Hi, Amitansh. This is Amrinder.
Hi, Amrinder. How are you?
So the way you started and the problem with Kaggle challenges and the way you began the problem, minimizing the loss ratio by not focusing on loss ratio but increasing the sales and decreasing the claim. So coming to that, how do you set a price for an item, not predicting it, but I want to increase the profit by 20%?
If I got your question correctly, Amrinder, are you saying how do you change the pricing or increase the pricing? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Change the pricing so that I earn 20% more.
Okay. See, pricing is actually dependent on a lot of factors. Okay, you cannot just change it by 20% like on the whims. Okay, that's one. In order to change the pricing, some of the factors are the past incidence rates. Okay, in the past, how have you seen, let's say, on that price? What is the experience? Okay, so if you see I'm selling the insurance at 2,000 rupees and then I'm making a loss overall on per policy, I'm making a loss of, let's say, 1,800. You know that it's supposed to be priced higher because I need to. So I think those are the factors. You cannot directly increase the price like that, if I can say that. But yes, if you want to, there are certain things that allow you to increase the price, and we can discuss. I think it's slightly technical topic, so I'll just take it offline on LinkedIn or something like that.
Sure. Thanks.
Thanks, Amrinder.
Any more questions, guys? Yes, Vishal. The recordings will be shared in a few days. Guys, if there are no questions, I think we are good to end. Amitansh, any ending note for them?
Yeah, I think thank you guys for joining in on this early Sunday morning. I know how tough it is to wake up because I actually had a hard time. I had 3 alarms today. Okay, and had it not been for Vijay's reminder, probably I would have joined like 2 minutes late. So thank you all for joining on time. Thank you all for taking your mornings out. I hope I was helpful. My LinkedIn ID is Amitansh G. So I think you can just enter Amitansh G and you'll search, you'll find it. I think it should not be a problem. So yep, and let me know how did you like the session. It's always good to hear things that went well and things where we can improve. It also helps me as a person prepare well for future learners, which might be your juniors coming some few weeks or months down the line. So please let me know your feedback on LinkedIn, on message, on email, whichever way possible. And yep, have a good day, stay safe, and be well, and all the best.